Paving the way for climate lockdowns. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee. We're going to have a look at an article from the ABC News looking at financial regulator APRA to stress test the banks on climate change, to examine what would happen if the world were to become 3 degrees hotter. Well, lucky we have APRA here to stress test this. Now, I'm going to put my let's say tinfoil or aluminium foil hat on here and theory craft a little bit. Do a little bit of what if theory crafting for a Sunday. Because, well, this isn't the first time we've seen the media talking about modeling from one organization to another, and I would suggest that the last time this happened, it was done for political purposes. Remember the 50% property price fall? Economic recovery will be unpredictable and uneven, the RBA warns as it models 50% property price fall. RBA property market can withstand a 40% crash. RBA paper points to a 30% house price rise. That's the opposite. That's this year now. RBA makes interest rate call amid a housing price boom. So we can see here that there were calls of crashing. And a year later, now we're seeing everything written about a booming housing market. Now, what happened with the modeling, with the 50% modeling? Well, we've gotten government intervention, significant government intervention in the last year in our property market. Now, perhaps that was just necessary to kind of nudge our politicians along or to create enough of a, acceptance in the populace to allow the government to so easily just stimulate the economy. You can see they changed the rules with regards to trading while insolvent, everyone. Where'd my mouse go? Here. Trading while insolvent. Companies entering external administration are half of where they should be. You've got JobKeeper. Nearly 9% of those in the Victorian workforce were being supported by JobKeeper. You've got building approvals skyrocketing because of the home builder program and just the incentives to get into housing left, right, and centre. Housing is the piñata that our government hits to stimulate the economy. And then we have the mortgage loan repayment deferrals. Did anyone see that coming? Does that feel natural at all? Remember, none of these things were without the cost. We're talking $1.3 trillion worth of debt that our state and federal government has now incurred. Don't worry, future generations can bear that burden. But there's another series of articles that are appearing now more and more often as well, discussing the benefits of reduced human activity. We're all being locked down, so it's good for the environment. Less pollution, less carbon being used, less energy being used. Air pollution impacts of COVID-19 related containment. Air pollution's going lower. The lockdown leaves Hyderabad's air less polluted. Pollution levels in Chennai falls due to strict lockdowns. Are COVID-19 lockdowns really causing nature to heal? Isn't that nice, everyone? Wow, fantastic. So, perhaps I'm just worrying for no reason at all, but could this be foreshadowing of calls for climate lockdowns? Could we start seeing calls from radical environmentalists who have successfully intervened in our lives, who are quite authoritarian and who think they know better? Don't get me wrong, I'm not worried about climate change. It's a slow-moving disaster that humanity will overcome. Not at all. It doesn't keep me up at night. I'm much more worried about socialism that tends to go hand in hand with environmentalism, because that has, a lot of evidence that it kills people. I'm not worried about a slow-moving environmental temperature change which can be addressed in the next 100 years. It seems ludicrous to me. It seems to the point where some people are using this as a new quasi-religion. and they're obsessing about it and identifying with it. So let's have a look at what APRA is stress testing. Financial regulator APRA to stress test banks on climate change to examine what would happen in a 3 degrees hotter world. And they're just going to an extreme here. A key financial regulator is testing what would happen to Australia's economy if climate change creates a hothouse world with temperatures more than 3 degrees higher than the Earth's current average. I mean, let's just look at what another financial regulator is doing here in Australia. Oh, it's not working. I can't. We'll bring the wage growth here in Australia. RBA has failed at it again and again and again. I'm just going to find this image because I need to show it to people because it's crazy, everyone. It really is. Here's the good old wage price index from the RBA, and we'll look at their predictions. So they've failed at these predictions over and over, everyone. It's just a bit of a joke. I put it on a mug that they've failed that many times. Where is it? Here it is. Here we go. We can see here, in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2017. Now, here's the thing. With all of this type of modeling, you've got to understand it's based on economic modeling. That's how they estimate the impact of this stuff. It's not reliable. It's variable. And if it's based on Keynesian theories, do we even trust it? Back to anyone? Well, we'll have to see. A trend for the Australian, a tender, so it's going out the tender for the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority is seeking climate risk modelling on behalf of major banks by assessing the impacts on the nation's 500 biggest listed companies. Climate change is a systemic threat that, left unchecked, will undercut Australian economic growth and long-term investment returns, said Erwin Jackson, Director of Policy at the Investor Group on Climate Change. So completely biased. APRA's vulnerability assessment represents a critical step in the evolution of analysis on climate change as an economic and financial risk. The group, a collaboration of Australian and New Zealand institutional investors managing over $2 trillion in funds, said the research would illustrate the financial risks of unchecked climate change. No company or investor can escape economy-wide damage from climate change, he added. The authority's climate vulnerability assessment will begin to calculate banks' exposure to climate risk by assessing the physical risk of 50 of Australia's largest non-finance businesses. It will then expand to the top 500 companies. Acute and chronic physical risks expected to include a combination of some or all of the following risk types at each asset location: extreme heat, extreme rainfall, extreme weather, flooding, fire and bushfires, soil subsidence, coastal inundation, and storms, in the tender document noted. The tender wants to know what would happen under a disorderly transition to 2 degrees or a hothouse world. I mean, here's the thing. If you're old enough, you've seen all of this type of fear-mongering before. Remember, all the way back to Malthus. And it never amounts to anything. Humans adapt. Humans... There's opportunities. The biggest risk, though, is if the free market is stifled due to, bettors intervening in it, and then what could potentially provide a solution may not manifest. Neither scenario is great. In 2017, a group of central banks, called the Central Banks and Supervisors Network for Greening the Financial System, to manage systematic risk, posed a climate change to the finance system. The network defines a disorderly transition as one with action that is late, disruptive, sudden, and unanticipated, with sharper emission reductions needed than an orderly scenario. In a hothouse world, limited action leads to significant global warming, and as a result, strongly increased exposure to physical risks, including irreversible sea level rises. Here's the thing, that people actually believe the sea levels are rising. We'll look at like Vanuatu or somewhere. They'll say, look at this village that's been destroyed. And you look at the aerial photos of the last 100 years. or last 50 years. I did a video on it. There's been no sea level rise. It's just idiots building where they shouldn't. That's the thing. Come on. The scenario maps more than 3 degrees of warming, but also the impact of tipping points that may be triggered if the world surpasses 2 degrees, which would create what some experts call runaway temperature scenarios. Despite the hothouse world forecasting a 25% loss of GDP by 2100, it's considered conservative and does not include extreme events and societal changes like migration and conflict. It's incredibly important information. It's not information. It's just a guess. It's an assumption. It's a prediction. How often have we seen predictions that have failed again and again? How often are we reading the media? We saw the predictions that were used here by our own in our own media here in Australia. That's used for political purposes, propaganda to get the people on board. Perhaps this is just the first steps, everyone. Or am I getting too cynical in my old age? So, it's scary but prudent. Of course, well, it has to be scary. That's how you get the populace on side, said Daniel Ogoa, Director of Climate and Environment at the Australasian Centre for Corporate Responsibility. It will assist APRA and the banks, insurers and super funds it regulates to better understand the possible impacts from runaway climate change. As the last 18 months have demonstrated, Australia is acutely exposed to bushfires, floods and storms, he added. Okay, the bushfires. It's got nothing to do with climate change. Floods, storms, nope. Not at all. A lot of it's seasonal. A lot of it, bushfires, if anything. You look at the Royal Commission they did 100 years ago of all the dangerous bushfires that were occurring. If anything, it's bad management and planning and humans living closer in more rural areas that's causing these bushfires. Remember all the greenies that were protesting against backburning for safety? And then the whole communities got destroyed? Why isn't the media making reference to that? So, understanding how the increased frequency and severity of severe heat, heavy rain, natural disasters will impact the largest and most exposed ASIC-listed companies is incredibly important information. The Centre, a research and shareholder advocacy organisation, doesn't believe ASIC-listed companies have previously assessed the risk particularly well, creating a vacuum of information for shareholders to make good decisions. Australian companies must move beyond the approach of believing that extreme climate change just means warmer temperatures and understanding the systematic impact it will have on society, he concluded. Scenarios help planning. Climate Works Australia help businesses reduce carbon emissions to try to avoid the worst impact of climate change. This is part of the global new normal for financial systems, said Chief Executive Anna Skarbek. We are seeing increasing investor and regulator expectations that financial institutions are prepared for a range of climate scenarios. Organizations find scenarios like APRA's tender extremely useful, she said, in identifying risks and opportunities. It's for marketing, everyone. It's propaganda. Our economy-wide scenarios have been drawn on by financial institutions and governments already as they seek to understand how the financial system and the institutions within it would respond to various climate scenarios. APRA's work will help normalise this and build much-needed capacity for this. The Australian Banking Association is a lobby group that represents the largest interests of banks. Its chief executive, Anna Bligh, said local banks were working with regulators on the issues. Increasingly, the financial risks presented by climate change is a key area of consideration, she said. Banks are also working closely with their largest customers to manage the transition to a low-emissions future as required by regulators. The view of investors are also critical. The world's largest investment funds expects banks to assess and act on climate-related risks, and the tender's due by June 18. There you go. So guys, submit your tender in. So, but what do you think? Am I just worrying for nothing? Or is this laying the groundwork for future interventions? Can you see the people here who are protesting? Can you see them expecting you to be locked up for the good of the environment? For the greater good, everyone. We're saving lives. It's the same thing. People get conditioned to one, they'll get conditioned to the other. What's the solution to this, everyone? What's the solution? Simply to become politically active. I think too many people aren't interested, aren't active, aren't discussing it here in Australia. If Australia were to reduce all of our carbon emissions to nothing, it would make no impact on the planet. If we're doing it just to show off, to globally virtual signal, it will make no impact on the planet. But it will reduce our quality of life. It will reduce the ability for us to innovate and to discover solutions that might actually make an impact. Why don't we look at nuclear? So there you have it, guys. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Am I just, suffering the effects of not enough coffee? Or is this just laying the subtle groundwork for future interventions in our lives? As always, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. If you're a fan and enjoy the content I create here, there are a few ways you can support us. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon, sign up for SelfWealth or Stake, support us using our affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or AussieBroadband. Buy a merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.